After the mishap, the Secret Service doubled their patrols as an agent performing a cursory inspection of the partially abandoned White House finds a metal leg of a chair lying on the floor of the Lincoln bedroom. At this point, though, she notifies the supervisor, who subsequently notifies surveillance to scan their files to determine how it got there and who brought it. So the two men that were working the surveillance unit the night the event occurred were back to work with their little stronghold protected by their trusty four-legged chair, got to work reviewing past digital files. And this task, which is a little time consuming, takes in every minute of every hour for a good 30-day period, where the leg of the chair is present in the middle of the room. This presence of a metal leg is even occurring while groups of people are touring the White House, and when they enter the Lincoln room, they seem to just step over it. The guides conducting the tours don't even notice it being present. And it was even more eerie when they reached a point in the file where the president's daughters were being sheltered in the room with the Secret Service around them. But no one seemed to notice the leg of the chair, although visible in the file, lying in the open just several feet from the room's occupants. The results of the scan to the surveillance staff can only mean one thing, and that for some reason the digital feed is corrupted. So they inform their superiors of what they have found and considered the logical evaluation and told the agent to just bring the leg to the security room for safekeeping. Unfortunately, it took some time to scan back over 30 days seeking out the chair leg's origin with no success. So it was time for a break to stretch and walk outside their four-walled stronghold. But when the senior technician turned around to exit, he found that the four-legged chair they propped up against the door regularly for the past several days has suddenly lost one of its legs. The two technicians look at each other, knowing full well that no one has come or gone from this room since the last time the chair was put into place. But what's the most eerie of the whole matter is that the nut and bolt that would have held the leg in place on the chair is still fastened. At this point, they simply turned the cameras off as they looked at each other and then around the small enclosure, which suddenly has become their prison. The bizarre does not stop there, as crying is heard during a quiet but less than normal day in one of the faraway rooms in the White House. A butler who has been investigated and allowed to remain at work starts running alongside the White House's female chief of staff as they arrive at the room at almost the same moment. But what the two people witness is hard to imagine, because in the room at what appears to be 49 babies lying on every flat surface, wrapped in blankets, and not one of the babies is asleep. What to do first is hard to fathom, because the infants are crying in unison, and that can mean a lot of different things, such as hunger, wet, sleepy, or simply in need of a hug. The butler, though, enters first, while the lady's staff members tries to notify security as well as the FBI and other law enforcement authorities that the babies discovered might be the missing infants. Unfortunately, as she turns and walks back away from the room, the cell phone starts to give her trouble, and even though the phone is ultra expensive and she has not had any problems in the past, it's suddenly taken an inopportune time to perform. So the woman turns around again and heads back towards the room, hoping to make some connection with the outside world. But still she experiences total defeat in her endeavor. So she decides that it might be better if she were closer to the outside window for better reception. She then enters the room while at the same time placing her hand over one ear so she can hear whomever answers over the crying of the babies, but finds that the minute she enters the room, the babies become silent. Momentarily, she stops what she is doing with the phone and looks right at the butler, who is looking back at her. A look of relief at the silence slowly appears on both their faces. The woman, now feeling that the butler can maintain the situation until help arrives, starts to walk back out of the room, but just as she reaches the door to exit, the babies start crying again. She shakes her head as she turns around, taking a step back into the room, and the crying stops again. This woman, though, who maintained the daily activity for the most powerful house in the world, didn't believe in religion and didn't believe in God. So there was absolutely no reason why these children would act in an obstinate manner. But she wasn't a fool either, and had to admit that for some reasons the babies sensed her presence. At this moment she instructs the butler to withdraw from the room and notify the authorities, because she apparently wasn't going to go anywhere. Unfortunately for the law enforcement authorities, when they arrived, the doors to the room sealed shut. But the discovery of the 49 children was still alive within the room was too exhilarating for one officer as he scurried forward to retrieve a child. And although he expected to batter the door down in the same manner as the maintenance person in the hallway outside the House of Representatives chamber on Capitol Hill, he found himself exposed to the same pent-up energy present that wasn't going to allow his bravado, and the same pulse of energy exploded for everyone to see, surrendering this man unconscious to the darkness as he lay across the hall on his back. It was at this point that the President of the United States of America ordered every bit of law enforcement off the premise. The President's family, unfortunately, was still on premise, but the First Lady and the girls were restricted to another part of the residence. Camp David to them was out of the question, because a helicopter might work, but it also might fail in the same manner as a steel door leading to the protective shelter might fail. A caravan of vehicles leading away from the White House in the ensuing storm might also be dangerous. So there are limited options left except to remain at the house. But their self-imposed exile ordered by the President for his family wasn't going to last, as the women, mother and daughters, were drawn by a feeling that couldn't be ignored. And the President found himself not being able to argue with them. It was an innate feeling of motherhood. The two girls and their mother now find themselves playing with and helping to attend to the babies in the room. But even their behavior is restricted, because the minute one of them walks towards the door with a baby in hand, the child starts to cry, and then the others quickly join in. And not knowing what would happen if they continued their exit, they were forced to turn around. The President, the anointed abortion king of the world, doesn't enter the room at all. Even though the two doors to the room are wide open, the President can see his family playing with the babies, but that's as far as he can go, because there is an aura of disapproval, of shame, that cannot be seen but only felt in a spiritual manner. It is not evil in the sense that it doesn't belong there, because it is protecting and not harming. It is not good because these babies were taken, but no one knows why. He might be the President of America on Earth, but that is as far as his authority goes. A short time later, everyone has been removed from the room where the babies rested except for a female maid that was pressed into service to babysit. Several other women were also obtained to implement around-the-clock coverage. The first family was encouraged to relocate back to the other side of the residence, and with minor discussion they complied. Law enforcement authorities were still on the premise and located outside, but this was a decision they made willingly because their vehicles wouldn't run or were simply snowed in. The Secret Service wasn't happy either because not one intruder arrived at the White House, but the mere fact that 49 of the 50 missing little urchins were resting at a meeting room would require a person to carry each. With the president's acquiescence and the baby's appearance, most of the White House has been placed off limits. The outside world, though, was happily ignorant to the goings-on in Washington, D.C. at the time, but the all-knowing Vatican, for some reason, is keeping a wide berth. And this abdication by the highest spiritual authority on earth might be because most of the priests saw The Exorcist, and the thought of having 49 babies spewing pea soup at them was too much to even imagine. So scientists, the quote, doctors of the physically impossible, unquote, have been brought in by Homeland Security to take readings for paranormal activity. But the only measurements they receive are of each other as they have their hearts now beat at a rapid rate. But pretending to believe in ghosts is not the same as having to confront one. And where exactly is this ghost and what does it want? We can go to the moon without God's help. We can investigate the pyramids and the Mayan calendar. So surely we can investigate other earthly phenomena just as easily. So these experts were set to discount the spirit world, and their perceptions were already fixed because this house was built over 200 years ago. It was old and creaky. Breezes found their way through any size hole, and the right combination could open and close these doors. So there is no mystery, it was just physics and science. The babies, on the other hand, were simply kidnapped from one location and brought to another location, probably by the same people that panicked the president and his family. 50 kidnappers minus one child can synchronize and open a lot of doors at one time. No mystery, 2 events solved. Regardless of the different possibilities for the 2 events occurring, the spastic doors and the baby's appearance, the scientists simply walk into the White House with their elaborate spiritual debunking equipment, sat down on the floor, and fell asleep. There were no witnesses to explain the scientists' behavior, but when they awoke, they found that the equipment had been turned on. Unfortunately, the only aberration they could hear was each other snoring. But the strangest scribbling was observed on one of the walls, and it simply read, "On what day did God create science?"